Okay, so this is our post-EOC test review, or the geometry test review. So for the first one, number one, it was asking for you to find the one that was equivalent to the square root of 32, but obviously there are not any answer options, so we're just going to simplify the square root of 32. So remember, whenever we are going to simplify a value that we cannot just simply take the square root of, what we want to do is look for factors of 32 where one of them is a perfect number. So remember, you can always do that y equals, and then in this situation it would be 32 divided by x to look at all those factors, but I'm just going to go over them very quickly. So I know we have 1 and 32, but that we don't want to use that one. There is 2 and 16. 3 doesn't work, and then there is 4 and 8, and then it's going to start repeating itself. And so now we need to look at it to see which one is our highest perfect number that it's a factor of 32. Well, I know that 4 is a perfect number because if I take the square root of 4, I would get 2. But I also know that 16 is a perfect number because when I take the square root of it, I get 4. So I want to use the larger one. So I'm going to use these two. So now when I take the square root of 32, I can actually rewrite it as the square root of 16 times the square root of 2, which is the same as my square root of 32. And now I'm going to simplify it. I'm going to go ahead and take the square root of 16, make that 4, and then I just keep the square root of 2. So that would be my simplified answer. Okay. All right, so for number 2, we are going to label the 3 parts of our right triangle here. And we know that it is a right triangle because it has this little 90-degree symbol right here telling us that it is a right triangle. So I first want to always identify my C. That's supposed to be the hypotenuse, and it's always going to be the opposite of my right angle. So this is going to be my C. And then it doesn't really matter which one I label as A and B. I mean, I could have put B here and A here. It does not matter. Okay, so for number 3, we need to write our Pythagorean theorem formula. That is the A squared plus B squared equals C squared. So that's our formula. But now I want us to think in terms of like how we would set it up. Let's say if we were missing the hypotenuse. So if we were missing the hypotenuse, we would set it up as C squared equals A squared plus B squared, because we would have the A and the B value, we would be missing the C value. But if we're missing a leg, we would have it as, and whatever you want to label the leg, it does not matter. You could say that it's the A missing or the B, it would not matter. But we just know that we would set it up as C squared. Let's say that we said that we know our A. So it would be C squared minus A squared that equals B squared. Okay, or you could look at it as B squared equals C squared minus A squared. Preferably like this instead of this way. All right, so what is the length of the missing side for number 4? So here we have our right triangle. We know it's a right triangle because it has the 90-degree angle here. So I'm going to label my sides. So this 10 is my C, and then I'm just going to say that 8 is A and the B is the X. So I'm looking for B. So with these same ideas up here, that means I'm missing a leg, so I'm going to say that B squared equals, so first I'm going to put my C value, so that's 10 squared, minus my A squared, which is 8 squared. Okay, so right into the calculator to find one that works. So I would have 10 squared minus 8 squared, which gives me a value of 36. So B squared equals 36. And then to solve for B, I just simply take the square root of each side. So then B equals, and I want to make sure it's a perfect number, and it is, so I don't have to do any further work. So B equals 6. All right, So number 5 is saying, what is the length of the hypotenuse? So it's telling us right now that our C value is what is missing. All right, so we can just say this is A and this is B. So again, using the same idea up here, whenever we're missing the hypotenuse, we would set it up as C squared equals, so my A is going to be this 5 square root of 2. So inside the parentheses, I'm saying 5 square roots of 2 squared, because that's my entire A value that has to be squared. And then plus my B value, which is the 2 squared. So I'm going to do this right in the calculator with my parentheses and all. So I have 5 second square 2, and I'm going to square that plus 2 squared. So that gives me a value of 54. Okay, so now to solve for C, I need to take the square root of each side, and I'm going to get that C equals. Now I know that, and I'll show you, if I took the square root of 54, I would get a decimal, and I don't want a decimal. I just want to simplify it. So what I'm going to do is go into y equals and do 54 divided by x, because again, I want to look at factors of 54, because I'm looking for the largest, or the factor that is the largest perfect number. So I know 2 and 27 will not work. Neither one of those are perfect numbers. 3 and 18, neither one of those are perfect numbers. 6 and 9. So 9 is a perfect number, and then it looks like it's going to start repeating. So that has to be the value that I am looking for. So that means I can take up here, I'm going to do it up here, this square root of 54, and I'm going to rewrite it as the square root of 9 times the square root of 6. And then I can go ahead and simplify it further by taking the square root of 9, which is 3, and that leaves me with the square root of 6. So C is going to be 3 square roots of 6. Okay. Sorry, let me put this. Okay, so going over to number 6. Number 6 says, a 20-foot ladder reaches a window that is 15 feet above the ground. How far is the bottom of the ladder from the base of the house? So to give us an idea of how we would even work this problem, we need to draw ourselves a picture. So for a window to be 15 feet above the ground, we know that it's going to have to go straight up. So this is going to be like that 15 feet that I have at this house that's right above this windowsill. And then it's saying that this 20-foot ladder reaches this window. So we know that this 20-foot ladder is going to have to be leaned over to reach that 15 feet up. Now it's wanting to know how far is the bottom of the ladder from the base of the house. So that's this part that I'm looking for. This is what I'm in question of. So I know that I have a right angle because the house is going to be perpendicular to the ground. So that means I can use the Pythagorean theorem. So before I set up my equation, I first have to look to see what values I have and what I don't have. So I know that this 20 is my C because it is the opposite of the right angle. And then I'm just going to say that A is the 15 and B is my X value that's missing. So I am missing a leg. So therefore I would set it up as B squared equals the C squared, which is 20 squared, minus my A squared, which is 15 squared. So that means B squared equals, so I'm going to do 20 squared minus 15 squared. So that's 175. Okay, so I know that in order to solve for B, I would have to take the square root of both sides. So let's see if 175 is a perfect number. And it is not, so I'm going to have to simplify it. So again, I'm going to go to y equals, and this time I'm going to do 175 divided by x, going to the table, and I'm looking for the largest perfect number. That's a factor of 175. And right here I have 25 and 7, and I'm thinking that's going to be my largest one because 7, yeah, my numbers are getting smaller. My numbers are getting smaller, and 7 is a prime number. So that means, I'm going to come over here, that I can take the square root of 175 and rewrite it as the square root of 25 times the square root of 7. So now I'm going to simplify the square root of 25 into 5, and then I have to leave the square root of 7. So therefore my B value equals, or my missing side is 5 square roots of 7. All right, number 7. What is the maximum height of a person that would be able to stand in a tent? So here's my tent. Okay, and it's telling me that the base of it is 16 and then the side is 10. But I also know that this is kind of like a isosceles triangle because, I mean, why would they make the sides different here? They would have to be congruent with each other. But I only need to know what one side is anyway. So I know that this over here would be a right triangle that I can use to help me figure out what the height is. But that means this value is no longer going to be 16. I'm going to have to split it in half and make it 8. Okay? And then I'm going to have to recognize that this value over here is my C, because that is my hypotenuse. It's the opposite of that right angle. So that means I have to be missing like the B value. So the missing leg. So that means we're going to set up our equation as B squared equals the C squared, which is 10 minus, the 8 squared. So in my calculator, I'm doing 10 squared minus 8 squared, which gives me a value of 36. So that means B squared equals 36. And to solve for B, we just take the square root. So let's see if it's a perfect number. It is. So B equals 6. Okay. Number 8. So what is the equation to use to solve for the missing side x? Okay. So I'm not really sure if it's just asking what equation we would use. We would use the Pythagorean theorem of a squared plus b squared equals c squared. But if they're talking about in terms of like how we would set this up, let's first identify everything that we know that we have. So the 20 has to be my c because it is the opposite of the right angle. So I'm just going to label 16 as a, and then the x will have to be my b. So when I set this up, since I'm missing a leg, I would have b squared equals 20 squared minus 16 squared. And that's going to be the equation that we would use to solve for the missing side. Okay, number 9. It tells us that LM, so from here to here, is congruent to MO. And it wants us to determine the length of LO. Okay, so since it's telling us that these two parts are congruent, that means they are equal to each other. So whenever I set up my equation to first determine whatever x is so I can figure out what my total lengths are, I need to set my equations equal to each other. So I have 3 over 2x minus 10 equals 1 over 4x and then plus 5. Okay. So to make this a little bit easier, let's just first convert our fractions into decimals so that whenever we have to move our x values around, it just makes it a lot easier with the decimals instead of using the fractions. So 3 divided by 2 gives me a decimal value of 1.5. So I'm going to rewrite this as 1.5 x minus 10 equals, and then 1 over 24 is just 0.25, and then the x plus 5. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is move the 0.25x because I want to get my x's together. So since it's a positive over here and I need it to zero out, I'm going to subtract the 0.25x. So now I'm going to do 1.5 minus 0.25. So that gives me 1.25. I have 1.25x minus 10 equals, and I still have this 5 over here. Now I want to isolate this 1.25x. So I'm going to add 10 to both sides. So this time that's going to zero out. Just zero it out over here. I'm going to come over here, and I have 1.25x equals, and that 5 plus the 10 gives me a 15. Okay, and now to solve for x, I just simply divide everything by 1.25. And I'm going to get that x equals 12. Okay, so remember, I'm not done because I need to figure out what the value of, or the length of LO is. Since I already know that these two sides are congruent, I really only need to find what the side or the length of one of them is, and I'm just going to multiply that by 2, which would be the same as adding them together to figure out what the total value of LO is. So I'm going to use the MO because I think it's a little bit easier. So I'm going to say MO equals 1 over 4 times. So instead of X, I'm putting 12 here, and then I have to have my plus 5. So straight in the calculator, here's my 1 over 4, and then times 12, and then plus 5 gives me a value of 8. So that means MO equals 8. And if MO equals 8, that means LM equals 8. So therefore, LO would be 2 times 8, which equals 16. And that is what we're looking for. Okay, so let's flip it over to the back side. Okay, so it wants us to use the diagram for numbers 10 through 12. So number 10 says the angle ABD and DBC are congruent angles. So what is the value of X? So if they are congruent, that means that the angle of ABD is equal to the angle of DBC. So when I set up the equation, I'm just recording for the test review. Oh, you're fine. So when I set up my equation, I'm going to set it up just like this so that I can find the value of X. So I would have 3x minus 20 equals 2x minus 7. Okay, so now I'm going to first move my x, or my 2x over here so I can get my x's together. So I'm going to subtract 2x from both sides. This zeroes out. I'm going to come over here. So this 3x minus 2x just gives me 1x, or I'm just going to put x, not equals yet. That's a minus 20 equals negative 7. Okay, so now to solve for x, I'm going to add 20 to both sides. And I get that x equals 13 because negative 7 plus 20 is 13. So that takes care of number 10. So 11 says, what is the measure of ABD? So the measure of angle ABD equals, I'm going to take the 3 times my x value, which is 13, minus 20. So straight into my calculator here as I wrote it. Did you sneeze? No. Oh, let's say bless you. So it shows me that it equals 19 degrees. And it has to be in degrees because it's talking about an angle measure. All right, so what is the measure of angle ABC? So remember, the measure of ABD and DBC are the same. So all I have to do is take the measure angle of ABD and multiply it by 2, because that would be the same as adding those two together, and that'll give me the measure angle of ABC. So the measure angle of ABC equals 2 times 19, which equals 38 degrees. Okay, number 13. Or for 13 through 15, we're supposed to use this diagram here. So 13 is asking, what is the measure of U, Y, Z? So if you'll notice, first of all, we have this straight line. So that means this whole entire thing has to be 180 degrees. So then it's telling me that U, Y, X is 90 degrees. So your U, Y, Z has to be half of that 80 degrees, just like UYX is. So that makes it a 90-degree angle as well. So the measure of angle UYZ equals 90 degrees. So now it wants to know what the measure of angle AYO is. So you can see that they've given us this one that's 25 and this one that's 37 out of that total of 90. So all we need to do is take our 90 degrees and subtract 25 and 37 from it. And that'll give us our measure angle of AYO. So 90 minus 25 minus 37 gives me 28. So this would be 28 degrees. And then it wants to know what is the measure of x, y, a. So you already know that x, y, u is 90. So you're going to say 90 plus 25, the measure of angle x, y, a equals 90 plus 25, which is 115 degrees. Oh, sorry, you can't see my work. Okay, 16. So Emma measured the angle CST and discovered it was 115 degrees. So this whole entire thing is 115 degrees because this is CST. Okay, she didn't want to just give her neighbor the answer, so she made up a puzzle. So what is the value of x? So we see that angle TSP is 4x minus 3, and that PSC is equal to 2x minus 8. But if we add them together, we would get 115 because those angles both together make up the angle CST. So what we're going to do is, to solve for x, is set our equation up to be adding and equaling that 115. So 4x minus 3 plus 2x minus 8 equals 115. So now let's first combine our like terms. So we have 4x and 2x. That gives us 6x. And then we have this negative 3 plus this negative 8, which gives me a negative 11. So that's going to be minus 11 equals 115. Now we want to isolate the 6x. So we're going to add 11 to both sides. Let's go up over here. So we have 6x equals 126. And now we're just going to divide everything by 6 to solve for x. Oh, we can see that it would be 23. Oh my gosh, 21. Oh my gosh. And if you're not sure, you can always just put it in the calculator. All right. So for 17 through 19, we're going to use this diagram right here. So 17 says, how far is it from Megan's house to Valero gas station? So from her house to here. Well, in order to determine that, we first need to figure out what x is. So to figure out what x is, we're going to add all of them up together and set them equal to 80 because they're telling us that the total length of this segment is 80, and it's just giving us these pieces of the segment in equations. So again, we're going to say 2x plus 4x plus x plus 24 equals 80. So again, we're first solving for x so that we then can plug it into the 2x here to determine that length. So 2x plus 4x plus x gives me 7x plus 24 equals 80. And then I'm going to subtract 24 from both sides. So now I have 7x equals, so that's going to be 6. All right. So 56. Okay, and then 56 divided by 7. So x equals, that's 8, right? I can't think anymore. Yes. So that's not what it's asking for, though. We just found the value of x. We needed that x value to determine what was the length or the distance between Megan's house and Valero. So we're now going to have to say 2 times 8, which is going to be 16. So that's going to be our answer for number 17. 18 wants to know how far it is from the gas station to Megan's house. What? Why? How far is it from the gas station to... gas station to Megan? So it's 16. Why is that asking? It's going to be the same distance, 16. That's kind of weird. Anyway, so then number 19 says, what do you notice about the distance from the house to Valero and the distance from Valero to HEB? So we know that from the house to Valero is 16. But now let's figure out what it is from Valero to HEB. So that's going to be 4 times the 8, which equals 32. So one of them is 16, and the other one is 32. So what is, if we want to know, like, about the distance between the two of them, we know that it's the one from the house to the, or the Valero to HEB, right, is what it's asking for, is longer, or is a lot longer of a distance than the distance from Megan's house to the gas station, but by how much? So if you look at the 16, you know, if you were to multiply it by 2, you could get 32. So that tells us, or you could look at it like this, where you could say 32 divided by 16, that would give you 2. So that means that the distance from Valero to HEB is 2 times longer than house to Valero. Okay. All right, so this concludes the review for tomorrow's test. Be sure that you bring in your test review to get the 5 extra points for that. And remember, it must be completed with all the work on here as well. So I will see you tomorrow.